The cafeteria fell deadly silent as Jake slammed Naomi's lunch tray onto the floor, mac and cheese splattering across the tiles. "This table's for people who belong here," he sneered, watching for tears that never came. What Jake didn't see was the way Naomi's fingers curled into fists, or how the principal watching from the doorway wasn't just any administrator. He was a retired Special Forces commander, and the quiet girl they'd been tormenting, his daughter. Something will happen next in this story that you would have never imagined. From which country are you following this intense journey? Let us know in the comments, and make sure to subscribe, because this is just the beginning of a reckoning no one at Ridgewood High saw coming. The real question isn't whether Jake will get what he deserves, but whether he'll survive the transformation that's about to rewrite his entire future.
The final bell of the day echoed through the hallways of Ridgewood High, its shrill ring cutting through the humid afternoon air. Students poured out of classrooms like a dam had burst, backpacks slung carelessly over shoulders, sneakers squeaking against freshly mopped linoleum. The usual chorus of laughter, shouted plans, and the occasional slamming locker door filled the space with a chaotic energy that marked the end of another school day. Near the senior lockers, Jake Mercer leaned against the faded blue metal, his Letterman jacket hanging open to reveal the varsity football jersey underneath. He scrolled absently through his phone with one hand while the other fiddled with the cap of a soda bottle. Around him, his usual group had gathered: Tyler Reed, his best friend since middle school, Sarah Whitman, who always seemed to be texting someone new, and Mark Higgins, who laughed a little too loud at everything Jake said. "You see the new girl today?" Tyler asked, nudging Jake's shoulder as he popped a handful of chips into his mouth. Jake didn't look up from his phone. "Which one?" "The black girl. Quiet. Sat alone at lunch." Jake finally glanced up, his eyebrows raising slightly. "Oh yeah. What about her?" Tyler grinned, the kind of expression that usually meant trouble. "Just seems like she could use some welcoming to Ridgewood." Sarah rolled her eyes but didn't say anything. Mark's laugh rang out again, too loud as always. Jake felt the familiar thrill of anticipation curl in his stomach. It had been a boring week. Across the school, in the nearly empty cafeteria, Naomi Carter sat at the end of a long table, methodically working through the last of her lunch. Around her, the room had mostly cleared out, leaving behind crumpled napkins and the occasional forgotten textbook. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a harsh white glow that made the dark skin of her hands look almost purple where it pressed against the laminated tabletop. She ate slowly, chewing each bite carefully before swallowing. The food was good. Her father had packed it for her that morning, just like he had every day since they'd moved here 3 weeks ago. The container held baked chicken, roasted vegetables, and a small container of rice, all arranged neatly with military precision. A shadow fell across the table. Naomi didn't look up immediately. She finished her current bite, set her fork down carefully beside the container, and then lifted her eyes. 3 boys stood in front of her. The one in the middle, Jake, she'd heard him called, was smiling in a way that didn't reach his eyes. "This seat taken?" he asked, already pulling out the chair across from her. Naomi watched as he sat without waiting for an answer. The other 2, Tyler and Mark, flanked him, their postures loose and relaxed in a way that suggested they'd done this before. "You're new, right?" Jake continued when she didn't speak. "Naomi." She nodded once, her hands resting flat on the table in front of her. "Cool, cool." Jake leaned forward, his elbows on the table. "So here's the thing about Ridgewood. We've got traditions, ways of doing things." Naomi's expression didn't change. "Like," Jake continued, "new kids usually do something to prove they're cool enough to hang." Tyler snorted. Mark shifted his weight from foot to foot, his fingers tapping against his thighs. Naomi tilted her head slightly. "What did you have in mind?" Jake's grin widened. He reached across the table and flipped the lid of her lunch container closed with a sharp snap. "How about you go get us some real food from the vending machines? Our treat." The cafeteria had gone quiet around them. Naomi could feel the weight of dozens of eyes watching, waiting to see what she would do. She took a slow breath in through her nose, held it for a count of 3, then released it. "I'm good," she said, her voice even. Jake's smile faltered. He glanced at Tyler, then back at Naomi. "I don't think you heard me right. I said dash." "I heard you." Naomi met his gaze steadily. "I'm not going anywhere." A beat of silence. Then Jake's chair screeched as he pushed back from the table. In one swift motion, he grabbed the edge of her lunch container and flipped it over, sending food scattering across the table and onto the floor. The sound of rice hitting linoleum seemed unnaturally loud in the quiet room. Naomi looked down at the mess, then back up at Jake. Her face remained carefully blank, but something in her eyes had changed. A hardening, a focusing. Jake expected her to cry, to yell, to scramble to clean it up while everyone laughed. Instead, Naomi stood. She was taller than he'd realized, her posture straightening in a way that made him take an unconscious step back. "You done?" she asked. Before Jake could respond, a new voice cut through the tension. "Everything all right here?" Every head turned toward the cafeteria entrance. Principal Daniel Carter stood just inside the doorway, his arms crossed over his broad chest. The overhead lights gleamed off his shaved head and reflected in his dark eyes as they swept over the scene. Jake felt his stomach drop. Principal Carter wasn't like the other administrators at Ridgewood. There was something in the way he carried himself, in the way he looked at you, that made even the toughest kid straighten up without thinking. Naomi didn't look at her father. She kept her eyes locked on Jake as she said, very clearly, "No, it's not." The principal moved forward, his dress shoes clicking against the floor with military precision. Students parted to let him pass like the Red Sea. He stopped beside Naomi, looking from her to Jake and back again. "Mr. Mercer," he said, his voice deceptively calm. "My office." "Now." Jake opened his mouth to protest, but one look at the principal's face had him closing it again. He grabbed his backpack and slung it over one shoulder, shooting Naomi a glare as he passed. The principal watched him go, then turned to Naomi. "You okay?" Naomi nodded. "I'm fine." But as the cafeteria slowly returned to normal around them, as whispers spread like wildfire through the student body, one thing became abundantly clear to everyone present. Jake Mercer had just made the biggest mistake of his high school career. And Naomi Carter wasn't the type to let things go. The walk to Principal Carter's office felt longer than usual. Jake dragged his feet slightly, his sneakers scuffing against the polished floors as he followed the silent figure in front of him. The principal hadn't said a word since leaving the cafeteria, his broad shoulders squared beneath his crisp dress shirt, his posture rigid with a kind of discipline Jake had only ever seen in movies about boot camp. Jake's mind raced. He'd been sent to the office before, for skipping class, for talking back to teachers, once for that stupid prank with the fire alarm junior year, but this felt different. The air between them crackled with something unspoken, something dangerous. The office door swung open with a quiet creak. Principal Carter stepped inside and moved behind his desk without looking back. "Sit." Jake dropped into the chair across from the desk, his usual swagger noticeably absent. The room smelled like lemon cleaner and old books. A framed photo on the wall showed a younger Principal Carter in military uniform, his expression stern beneath the brim of his cap. The principal didn't sit. He remained standing, his hands clasped behind his back as he studied Jake with an intensity that made the back of the boy's neck prickle with sweat. "Mr. Mercer," he began, his voice low and measured, "do you know why you're here?" Jake shifted in his seat. "Because of the new girl? Her name is Naomi Carter." The principal's tone didn't change, but something in his eyes darkened. "She's my daughter." The words hit Jake like a physical blow. His mouth went dry. The principal's daughter? No one had said anything about that. No wonder she'd been so calm. She must have known nothing would happen to her. "I didn't know," Jake said quickly. "Sir, if I'd known that she was my daughter?" Principal Carter cut him off. "That's your defense? That you wouldn't have bullied her if you'd known who her father was?" Jake opened his mouth, then closed it again. The principal moved around the desk with slow, deliberate steps until he was standing directly in front of Jake's chair. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Let me tell you something about my daughter, Mr. Mercer. She spent her childhood moving from base to base while I served this country. She learned to make friends quickly and say goodbye just as fast. She's attended 6 different schools in 10 years. Jake swallowed hard. "Naomi," the principal continued, "has faced down armed soldiers at checkpoints in war zones. She's comforted crying children during mortar attacks. She once talked a shopkeeper with an AK-47 into lowering his weapon when he thought we were looting his store. A bead of sweat trickled down Jake's temple. So when I hear that my daughter, who has faced more danger before her 16th birthday than you will in your entire life, is being harassed by some spoiled brat with a varsity jacket. Principal Carter leaned down slightly, his face inches from Jake's. You'll understand if I don't particularly care whether you knew who her father was. The silence that followed was deafening. Jake could hear the clock on the wall ticking, each second stretching out unbearably. Finally, the principal straightened. You're suspended for 3 days. Jake's head snapped up. What? But dash. During which time, Principal Carter continued as if he hadn't spoken, you will write a 5-page essay on the history of civil rights in American education. You will also personally apologize to Naomi, in front of the entire cafeteria, when you return. Jake's hands clenched into fists. That's not fair. Other kids do way worse stuff and dash. Would you like to make it a week suspension? Jake snapped his mouth shut. The principal walked back around his desk and sat down. Your parents will be notified. You may wait outside for your ride. Jake stood on shaky legs, his face burning with a mixture of anger and humiliation. As he reached for the door handle, the principal's voice stopped him one last time. Oh, and Mr. Mercer? Jake turned. Principal Carter's smile didn't reach his eyes. Welcome to Ridgewood. The door clicked shut behind him. The ride home was silent. Jake sat slumped in the passenger seat of his father's Lexus, staring out the window as suburban houses blurred past. The air conditioning blew too cold against his skin, raising goosebumps on his arms beneath his Letterman jacket. His father hadn't said a word since picking him up from school, just jerked his head toward the car with that disappointed frown Jake knew all too well. 3 blocks from their house, his father finally spoke. Your mother is upset. Jake pressed his forehead against the cool glass of the window. I figured. The car slowed to a stop at a red light. Jake could feel his father studying him from the driver's seat. Care to explain what happened? Jake shrugged, the movement exaggerated by the heavy silence in the car. It was just stupid kid stuff. I didn't know she was the principal's daughter. The light turned green. His father accelerated slowly, his hands tight on the wheel. That's not what Principal Carter said. What did he tell you? That you and your friends have been targeting this girl since she arrived. That today wasn't the first incident, just the first time you got caught. Jake's stomach twisted. He opened his mouth to deny it, but the words died in his throat. The truth was, they had been messing with Naomi since her first day. Nothing major, just stupid high school crap. Whispering as she walked by, accidentally, bumping into her in the halls. That time Tyler stole her notebook and they passed it around during study hall. The car turned into their driveway. The garage door lifted with a mechanical groan, revealing his mother's SUV parked neatly on the other side. His father cut the engine but didn't move to get out. Jake. His voice was quieter now, almost tired. This isn't like you. Jake bit the inside of his cheek hard enough to taste blood. His father sighed. Go inside. Your mother wants to talk to you. And for God's sake, take that jacket off before you do. The house was too warm after the chilled car. Jake shrugged out of his Letterman jacket as he stepped into the kitchen, letting it fall carelessly over one of the bar stools. His mother stood at the counter, her back to him, chopping vegetables with sharp, precise movements. She didn't turn around. Sit. Jake slid onto a stool at the island. The knife thunked against the cutting board in a steady rhythm. After what felt like an eternity, his mother turned, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her mouth set in a thin line. Do you have any idea, she began slowly, how hard your father worked to get you that scholarship? Jake stared down at the granite countertop. Because let me tell you, Jacob, it wasn't easy. Not with your grades. Not with your attitude. She tossed the towel onto the counter. Principal Carter could revoke it with one phone call. Did you think about that before you decided to bully some poor girl? Jake's head snapped up. I wasn't bullying her. It was just what? His mother's voice cracked. Just harmless fun? Just boys being boys? Jake clenched his jaw. His mother took a deep breath, visibly collecting herself. When she spoke again, her voice was steadier. "You're grounded. Obviously. No phone, no car, no friends over. And you'll write that essay Principal Carter assigned." Jake opened his mouth to protest, but his mother cut him off. "And when you go back to school, you'll apologize to that girl. Properly. In front of everyone." The thought made Jake's skin crawl. Apologize in front of the whole cafeteria? That was social suicide. His mother must have seen the resistance on his face. Her expression softened slightly. "Jake, this isn't just about some girl. This is about who you want to be." Jake didn't respond. His mother sighed and turned back to her vegetables. "Go to your room." Upstairs, Jake slammed his bedroom door hard enough to rattle the framed photos on the walls. He threw himself onto his bed and grabbed his phone from where it was charging on the nightstand. The screen lit up with a flood of notifications. Texts from Tyler, Mark, half the football team. He opened the group chat. "Tyler, dude, WTF happened? Mark, heard you got suspended. Tyler, is it true the new girl is the principal's daughter?" Jake typed quickly. "Jake, yeah." The responses came instantly. Mark, "Holy shit." Tyler, "That's messed up." Sarah, "I told you guys to leave her alone." Jake tossed his phone onto the bed and stared at the ceiling. Outside, the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across his room. Somewhere in the house, a door opened and closed. His parents' muffled voices drifted up the stairs. He rolled onto his side and grabbed his phone again. There was one message he hadn't responded to yet. From Emily, his girlfriend. "Emily, call me when you can." Jake hesitated, then tapped her name. She picked up on the first ring. "Hey." Her voice was quiet. "Hey." A pause. Then, "Is it true? What everyone's saying?" Jake closed his eyes. "Probably." Another silence. Jake could picture Emily chewing on her bottom lip the way she always did when she was thinking. "Jake." She hesitated. "Why were you messing with her?" "I don't know." The answer came automatically, but as soon as he said it, Jake realized it was true. He didn't know. Naomi hadn't done anything to them. She'd just been there. New. Different. An easy target. Emily sighed. "You should apologize." Jake groaned. "Not you too. I'm serious. It's the right thing to do." Jake didn't respond. "Look," Emily said after a moment, "I gotta go. My mom's calling me for dinner. But, think about it, okay?" "Yeah, whatever." The call ended. Jake tossed his phone onto the bed again and rolled onto his back, staring up at the ceiling. Downstairs, the front door opened and closed. A car started in the driveway. His father leaving for his weekly poker game, probably. Life going on like normal. Except nothing felt normal anymore. Jake squeezed his eyes shut. 3 days of suspension. 3 days of being stuck in this house with his disappointed parents. 3 days for the entire school to talk about what happened. And then he'd have to go back and face her. The thought made his stomach churn. Outside, the last of the sunlight faded, plunging his room into darkness. The next morning dawned gray and drizzly. Jake woke to the sound of rain tapping against his window and his mother knocking on his door. "Jake? You awake?" He groaned and rolled over, pulling the pillow over his head. The door opened. "You have an appointment with Dr. Reynolds at 10. Jake sat up abruptly, the sheet pooling around his waist. "What? Why?" His mother stood in the doorway, already dressed for work in her usual blouse and slacks. "Because after what happened yesterday, your father and I think it would be good for you to talk to someone." Jake's face burned. "I don't need a shrink." His mother's expression didn't change. 10 o'clock. Be ready." She closed the door before he could respond. Jake flopped back onto the bed with a groan. This just kept getting worse. He reached for his phone, then remembered it was locked in his parents' room as part of his punishment. No texts, no social media, no way to find out what everyone at school was saying about him. The house was quiet as he got dressed, his father already at work, his mother presumably getting ready in her room. Jake wandered downstairs and poured himself a bowl of cereal, eating standing up at the counter. The kitchen TV was on mute, showing the morning news. Jake was about to turn away when a familiar image caught his eye. Ridgewood High's logo flashing on the screen. He grabbed the remote and turned up the volume. Incident at Ridgewood High School yesterday has sparked renewed discussions about bullying policies in the district, the news anchor was saying. While school officials have not released details, sources confirm a student was suspended following an altercation in the cafeteria. Jake's stomach dropped. The screen cut to footage of the school, then to a woman Jake recognized as the school board president. "We take all reports of bullying very seriously," she was saying. "An investigation is underway." Jake turned the TV off with shaking hands. This was bad. Really bad. His mother appeared in the doorway, her purse over her shoulder. "Ready to go?" Jake just nodded, his throat too tight to speak. The drive to the therapist's office was silent. Rain streaked the windows, blurring the world outside into indistinct shapes. Jake slouched in the passenger seat, his arms crossed over his chest. Dr. Reynolds' office was in a nondescript brick building near the hospital. The waiting room was empty except for an elderly woman flipping through a magazine. Jake sat in one of the uncomfortable chairs while his mother checked him in at the front desk. After a few minutes, a door opened and a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair stepped out. "Jake." Jake stood reluctantly. Dr. Reynolds smiled. "Come on back." The office was exactly what Jake had expected. Bookshelves filled with psychology texts, a couch, a box of tissues on the coffee table. A large window looked out onto the rainy parking lot. Dr. Reynolds gestured to the couch. "Make yourself comfortable." Jake sat on the very edge of the cushion, his hands clenched between his knees. Dr. Reynolds took the chair across from him. "So," he said, "your parents tell me you've been having some trouble at school." Jake shrugged. "Want to tell me about it?" Jake studied the pattern on the rug. "Not really." Dr. Reynolds nodded like that was a perfectly reasonable answer. "That's okay. We don't have to talk about school if you don't want to." Jake glanced up, surprised. The therapist smiled. "Tell me about football. You're on the team, right?" Jake hesitated, then nodded. "Varsity. What position?" "Quarterback." Dr. Reynolds leaned forward slightly. "You must be good." Jake shrugged again, but he could feel himself relaxing slightly. "I'm all right." For the next 45 minutes, they talked about football, about Jake's friends, about his plans for college. Dr. Reynolds was easy to talk to. He didn't push, didn't judge. By the time the session was over, Jake had almost forgotten why he was there. Almost. As they were wrapping up, Dr. Reynolds said, "Same time next week?" Jake blinked. "I have to come back?" The therapist smiled. "If you want to." Jake glanced at the door, where his mother was probably waiting in the lobby. "Yeah, okay." Dr. Reynolds stood and opened the door. "See you then, Jake." The ride home was just as quiet as the ride there. Jake stared out the window, watching the rain slide down the glass. His mother cleared her throat. "How was it?" Jake shrugged. "Fine." She nodded, her eyes on the road. "Good." When they got home, Jake went straight to his room. The house was empty, his father at work, his younger brother at soccer practice. He flopped onto his bed and stared at the ceiling. 3 days. He just had to get through 3 days. Then he could go back to school and face whatever was waiting for him. The morning of Jake's return to Ridgewood High dawned clear and cold. He stood in front of his bathroom mirror, adjusting his tie for the 3rd time. The crisp white shirt and navy blazer his parents had insisted he wear itched at his neck and shoulders. He looked like he was going to a funeral. Downstairs, the smell of coffee and bacon filled the kitchen. His mother stood at the stove, flipping pancakes with one hand while scrolling through her phone with the other. She looked up when Jake entered. "Hungry?" Jake shook his head. His stomach had been in knots since he woke up. His mother set the spatula down and turned to face him fully. "You have everything you need?" "The essay." Jake patted his backpack where the 5-page paper sat neatly in a folder. He'd spent most of his suspension working on it, researching civil rights cases and school policies until his eyes burned. His mother wiped her hands on a dish towel. "Principal Carter called last night. He wants to see you in his office before first period." Jake's fingers tightened around the strap of his backpack. Great. The drive to school was silent. Jake watched the familiar streets pass by. The same route he'd taken every school day for 3 years. Everything looked exactly the same. The same houses, the same stop signs, the same crossing guard waving at their car, but somehow it all felt different now. When they pulled into the student parking lot, Jake could see groups of kids milling around near the entrance. A few turned to look as his mother's car approached. His mother put the car in park but didn't turn off the engine. "Do you want me to come in with you?" Jake shook his head quickly. "No, I'm good." She studied his face for a long moment before nodding. "Okay, call me if you need anything." Jake grabbed his backpack and stepped out into the chilly morning air. The car pulled away as he walked toward the school, his dress shoes clicking against the pavement. The whispers started almost immediately. "That's him. Heard he got suspended for principal's daughter." Jake kept his eyes forward, his shoulders squared. He pushed through the front doors and headed straight for the principal's office, ignoring the stares and muffled comments that followed him down the hall. The school secretary looked up when he entered. "Jacob Mercer?" Jake nodded. She gestured to the chairs along the wall. "Principal Carter will be with you shortly." Jake sat, his backpack on his knees. The office was quiet except for the clicking of the secretary's keyboard and the occasional ring of the phone. A clock on the wall ticked loudly. After about 5 minutes, the inner office door opened. Principal Carter stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Mercer, come in." Jake stood and followed the principal into the office. The door clicked shut behind them. The office looked exactly as it had the last time Jake was here. Same desk, same chairs, same military portrait on the wall. The only difference was the addition of a third person sitting in one of the chairs facing the desk. Naomi. She looked up when Jake entered, her dark eyes meeting his briefly before flicking away. She wore a simple black sweater and jeans, her hair pulled back into a neat ponytail. A book lay open in her lap, her finger marking her place. Principal Carter moved behind his desk. "Sit down, Jake." Jake took the remaining chair, careful to leave space between himself and Naomi. He could smell the faint scent of her shampoo, something floral, maybe lavender. Principal Carter folded his hands on the desk. "I assume you've completed your assignment?" Jake reached into his backpack and pulled out the folder containing his essay. He handed it across the desk. "Yes, sir." The principal opened the folder and skimmed the first page. After a moment, he nodded and set it aside. "And your apology?" Jake's palms were sweating. He wiped them discreetly on his pants before turning to face Naomi. She had closed her book and was watching him expectantly. Jake took a deep breath. "I'm sorry for what I did. It was wrong and I shouldn't have." His voice cracked. He cleared his throat and started again. "I shouldn't have treated you that way. There's no excuse for it." Naomi studied him for a long moment before nodding slightly. Principal Carter leaned forward. "Naomi has agreed to accept your apology. However, there will be consequences beyond your suspension." Jake turned back to the principal. "Sir, you'll be attending weekly counseling sessions with Dr. Evans, our school psychologist. You'll also complete 20 hours of community service, 10 of which will be spent assisting Coach Wilkins with the special needs athletic program." Jake blinked. The special needs program? Principal Carter's expression hardened. "Is that a problem?" "No, sir." "Good." The principal stood, signaling the meeting was over. "Your first session with Dr. Evans is today after school. Coach Wilkins expects you at practice tomorrow at 3:30. Jake stood as well, his mind racing. The special needs program? He'd seen those kids around, the ones with Down syndrome and wheelchairs and other issues he didn't really understand. What was he supposed to do with them? Naomi stood too, tucking her book under her arm. She hadn't said a word the entire meeting. Principal Carter came around the desk. "One more thing, Jake." Jake looked up. The principal's voice was quiet but firm. "This is your last chance. Any further incidents, and we'll be having a very different conversation." "Understood." Jake nodded. "Yes, sir." "Good. You may go to class now." Jake turned and left the office, his legs shaky beneath him. The hallway outside was crowded with students rushing to first period. He took a deep breath and stepped into the flow of bodies, letting the current carry him toward his locker. He was halfway there when someone grabbed his arm and yanked him into an empty classroom. Tyler. His friend's face was flushed, his eyes wide. Dude, what happened? We've been trying to text you all week. Jake shook his arm free. My parents took my phone. Mark appeared from behind a row of desks. Did you really have to apologize to her? Jake's face burned. Yeah. So what? Tyler and Mark exchanged a look. So what? Tyler repeated. Man, the whole school's talking about it. There was even something on the news. Jake's stomach twisted. What? Mark pulled out his phone and tapped the screen. Some local reporter did a piece about bullying. They didn't say your name, but everyone knows it's you. He held out the phone. Jake stared at the screen, where a blonde reporter stood in front of Ridgewood High, talking about a recent incident that has parents questioning the school's anti-bullying policies. Jake pushed the phone away. Whatever. It'll blow over. Tyler shook his head. I don't know, man. Coach was asking about you at practice. Said he might have to bench you for Friday's game. That hit Jake like a punch to the gut. Football was everything. His ticket to college, the one thing he was actually good at. Without it, the warning bell rang. Mark headed for the door. Come on, we're gonna be late. Tyler clapped Jake on the shoulder. Don't worry, man. We'll figure this out. Jake didn't respond. He followed his friends into the hallway, his mind racing. The crowd had thinned as students hurried to class, but he could still feel eyes on him, hear whispers as he passed. And then he saw her. Naomi stood at her locker, calmly swapping out books. She didn't look up as Jake walked by, didn't react to the whispers or the stares. She just went about her business like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Jake adjusted the strap of his backpack and kept walking. The counseling session after school was worse than Jake had imagined. Dr. Evans' office smelled like lavender and old books, and the therapist herself had one of those calm, understanding voices that made Jake want to scream. So, she said, setting her notepad aside, tell me about what happened. Jake slouched in the overstuffed chair, picking at a loose thread on his jeans. You already know what happened. Dr. Evans smiled. I've read the report. I'd like to hear it from you. Jake sighed. I messed with the new girl. Got suspended. Now I'm here. Why did you mess with her, as you put it? Jake shrugged. I don't know. It was just something to do. Dr. Evans studied him for a moment. Tell me about Naomi. What about her? What do you know about her? Jake thought for a moment. She's the principal's daughter. She's quiet. She doesn't take crap from anyone. Dr. Evans nodded. Anything else? Jake shook his head. The therapist leaned forward slightly. Did you know she spent most of her childhood moving between military bases? That she's attended 6 different schools in 10 years? That her mother died when she was 8? Jake's head snapped up. What? Dr. Evans' expression was unreadable. Naomi Carter has faced more challenges in her 16 years than most people do in a lifetime. And yet, when she came to Ridgewood, the first thing she encountered was you making her life difficult. Jake's face burned. He looked down at his hands. The therapist sat back. I'm not telling you this to make you feel guilty, Jake. I'm telling you because I think you're capable of more. Much more. Jake didn't respond. Dr. Evans glanced at the clock. Our time's up for today. Same time next week. Jake stood quickly. Yeah, sure. He practically bolted from the office, his mind reeling. Naomi's mother was dead? She'd moved 6 times? Why hadn't anyone told him that? The hallway outside was empty except for a janitor mopping near the lockers. Jake headed for the front entrance, his footsteps echoing in the quiet. As he pushed open the school doors, he saw her. Naomi sat on the front steps, her backpack beside her, a book open in her lap. She looked up as Jake approached, her expression unreadable. Jake hesitated, then took a step toward her. Hey! Naomi closed her book. Hey! Jake shoved his hands in his pockets. I didn't know about your mom. Naomi's eyes flickered with something. Surprise, maybe, before her expression smoothed over again. Okay. Jake shifted his weight from foot to foot. I'm really sorry. For everything. Naomi studied him for a long moment, then nodded. I know. A car pulled up to the curb, a sleek black sedan with Principal Carter behind the wheel. Naomi stood and slung her backpack over one shoulder. See you tomorrow, Jake. Jake watched as she got into the car and drove away. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the school parking lot. He took a deep breath and started walking home. The next afternoon, Jake stood outside the gym doors, shifting his weight from foot to foot. The muffled sounds of bouncing balls and squeaking sneakers leaked through the heavy double doors. He checked his phone. 3:28 p.m. 2 minutes until he had to face whatever was waiting for him inside. Coach Wilkins had a reputation for being tough but fair. A former Marine with a prosthetic leg from an IED explosion in Afghanistan, he ran the special needs athletic program with the same discipline as he did the varsity teams. Jake had never spoken to him outside of football practice, but he'd heard stories. At exactly 3:30, Jake pushed through the doors. The gym looked different during the day. Sunlight streamed through the high windows, illuminating dust motes floating in the air. About 15 kids were scattered across the court, some in wheelchairs, others with visible disabilities Jake couldn't name. A few assistants in blue polo shirts stood around, offering encouragement as the kids practiced dribbling basketballs. Coach Wilkins spotted him immediately. Mercer, over here. Jake crossed the court, acutely aware of the curious glances following him. Coach Wilkins stood with his arms crossed, his prosthetic leg visible beneath his shorts. Up close, Jake could see the scars trailing up his neck, disappearing into his collar. You're late. Jake checked his phone again. It's 3:30, and the program starts at 3:25. Coach's voice left no room for argument. Early is on time is late, and late is unacceptable. Understood. Jake nodded. Yes, Coach. Coach Wilkins studied him for a long moment before nodding toward the court. Today we're working on basic basketball skills. You'll be assisting Michael over there. He pointed to a boy in a wheelchair near the free throw line. Michael has cerebral palsy. He's been working on his shot for 3 months. Jake swallowed hard. What should I do? Rebound. Encourage. Don't treat him like he's made of glass. Coach clapped him on the shoulder. Hard. And Mercer? This isn't punishment. This is opportunity. Don't waste it. Michael turned out to be a 16-year-old with a wicked sense of humor and a jump shot that was steadily improving. His wheelchair was decked out in Ridgewood colors, with basketball stickers covering the frame. You must be the bully, Michael said as Jake approached. Jake froze. What? Michael grinned. Kidding. Mostly. Coach told me you'd be helping today. He spun his chair to face the basket. You know how to rebound? Jake grabbed the basketball that had rolled near his feet. Yeah, I play. He caught himself. Played varsity. Michael held out his hands. Then let's see what you got, hotshot. For the next hour, Jake chased down missed shots, passed the ball back, and, when Michael finally sank one from the free throw line, found himself cheering louder than anyone else in the gym. During a water break, Michael wheeled over to the bench where Jake was sitting. So what did you do to get stuck with us? Jake twisted the cap off his water bottle. Picked on the wrong girl. Michael nodded sagely. Principal's kid, right? Naomi. Jake's head snapped up. You know her. She comes sometimes. Reads to the kids who can't participate. Michael took a sip from his own bottle. She's cool. Doesn't treat us like we're stupid. Jake stared at the scuffed gym floor. Michael studied him. You really sorry about what you did? Jake met his gaze. Yeah, I am. Michael nodded once, then gestured to the court. Well, redemption starts with helping me make 10 more baskets before practice ends. You in? Jake stood, a strange lightness in his chest. Yeah, I'm in. The next day at lunch, Jake hesitated outside the cafeteria doors. His usual table, the one in the corner where the football team always sat, was already full. Tyler and Mark were holding court, surrounded by their usual group. Jake took a deep breath and walked past them. He spotted Naomi sitting alone at a table near the windows, reading a book while she ate. Without allowing himself to overthink it, Jake walked over and set his tray down across from her. Naomi looked up, one eyebrow raised. Jake sat. "Mind if I join you?" Naomi studied him for a long moment before closing her book. Free country. The chatter in the cafeteria dipped noticeably as people noticed them sitting together. Jake ignored it, focusing on unwrapping his sandwich. After a minute of silence, Naomi spoke. "How was the special needs program?" Jake looked up, surprised she knew about that. "Good. Really good, actually. I'm helping this kid Michael with his basketball shot." Naomi's expression softened slightly. "Michael's great. You know him?" She nodded. "I volunteer there sometimes." Another silence fell, but it wasn't as uncomfortable as before. Jake took a bite of his sandwich, watching as Naomi opened her book again. "Can I ask you something?" Jake said after a while. Naomi looked up. "Why didn't you tell anyone who your dad was when we first started? You know." Naomi closed her book again. "Would it have mattered?" Jake opened his mouth, then closed it. The honest answer was yes. He never would have messed with her if he'd known. But that just proved her point. Naomi seemed to understand. "People shouldn't be nice to me because of who my father is. They should be nice because it's the right thing to do." Jake nodded slowly. Across the cafeteria, Tyler stood up suddenly, his chair scraping loudly. "What the hell, Mercer?" The room went quiet. Jake turned to see Tyler storming toward their table, his face red. Mark followed close behind, looking between Jake and Naomi with wide eyes. Tyler stopped at their table, looming over Jake. "Dude, are you serious right now?" Jake stood slowly. "It's just lunch, Ty. Just lunch." Tyler's voice rose. "First you apologized to her in front of the whole school. Now you're eating with her? What's next? You gonna join the mathletes too?" A few nervous laughs scattered through the crowd. Jake's hands clenched at his sides. "Back off." Tyler's eyes widened. "Oh, I get it. You're scared of her daddy." He turned to Naomi with a sneer. "Must be nice having the principal wrapped around your little finger." Jake saw Naomi tense, her fingers tightening around her book. Before he could stop himself, Jake stepped between them. "That's enough." Tyler blinked, then laughed incredulously. "Are you kidding me right now? You're defending her." Jake didn't move. "I'm telling you to walk away." The cafeteria was utterly silent now. Every eye was fixed on them. Tyler's face twisted. "Whatever, man. Have fun being Principal Carter's bitch." He turned and stormed out, Mark trailing after him with one last confused look at Jake. The chatter started up again as soon as they were gone, louder than before. Jake sank back into his chair, his hands shaking slightly. Naomi was watching him with an unreadable expression. Jake ran a hand through his hair. "Sorry about that." Naomi tilted her head. "Why did you do that?" Jake met her gaze. "Because it was the right thing to do." For the first time since he'd met her, Naomi smiled. It was small, barely there, but it changed her whole face. Jake found himself smiling back. The bell rang, signaling the end of lunch. As they gathered their things, Naomi hesitated. "You know this isn't going to make things easier for you, right?" Jake slung his backpack over his shoulder. "Yeah, I know." Naomi nodded. "Okay. Just making sure you're prepared." They walked out of the cafeteria together, the whispers following them down the hall. The next week passed in a blur of whispered conversations and sideways glances. Jake's former friends ignored him in the halls, and even some of his teachers looked at him differently now. Football practice was the worst. Tyler and the other players made sure he felt every missed block and bad pass, their usual camaraderie replaced with icy silence. Only two places felt normal anymore: the special needs athletic program and the lunch table he now shared with Naomi. On Thursday afternoon, Jake was helping Michael practice free throws when Coach Wilkins called him over. "Principal wants to see you," Coach said, wiping sweat from his forehead with a towel. "Now." Jake's stomach dropped. "Did I do something wrong?" Coach Wilkins gave him an unreadable look. "Guess you'll find out." The walk to the principal's office felt longer than usual. Jake's palms were sweating by the time he reached the door. He knocked twice. Come in. Principal Carter sat behind his desk, his expression impossible to read. Naomi sat in one of the chairs facing him, her posture perfect as always. She didn't look at Jake when he entered. "Have a seat, Jake," Principal Carter said. Jake sat slowly, his mind racing. Had Naomi told her father about the incident in the cafeteria? Had Tyler done something? Principal Carter folded his hands on the desk. "I've been hearing some interesting things about you lately." Jake swallowed hard. "Sir, Coach Wilkins tells me you've been doing excellent work with the special needs program. Says Michael's jump shot has improved 20% since you started working with him." Jake blinked. That wasn't what he'd expected. Yeah, I guess. Michael works hard." Naomi's lips twitched slightly. Principal Carter nodded. "Dr. Evans also reports you've been engaged in your counseling sessions. That you're making progress." Jake glanced at Naomi, but she was studying a spot on the wall behind her father's head. "And then there's this." Principal Carter slid a sheet of paper across the desk. It was a letter. Handwritten. "Dear Principal Carter. I just wanted to say how impressed I've been with Jake Mercer lately. My son Jason is in the special needs program, and Jake has been so patient and kind with him. I know about what happened earlier this year, and I just wanted you to know how much we appreciate the change we've seen in him. Sincerely, Mrs. Karen Whitmore." Jake stared at the letter, his throat tight. Jason was a sweet kid with Down syndrome who mostly liked to dribble in circles and high-five everyone. Principal Carter leaned forward slightly. "People can change, Jake. But real change, lasting change, comes from within. It seems you're finding your way." Jake didn't know what to say. "Thank you, sir." The principal stood, signaling the meeting was over. "Keep it up." Naomi stood too, finally meeting Jake's eyes. There was something new in her expression, something like respect. They walked out together in silence. When they reached the hallway, Naomi hesitated. "My dad doesn't give compliments easily," she said quietly. Jake ran a hand through his hair. "Yeah, I noticed." Naomi studied him for a long moment. "You're different than I thought you'd be." Jake wasn't sure how to respond to that. "Good different." Naomi shouldered her backpack. "We'll see." She walked away, leaving Jake standing in the hallway, the echo of Principal Carter's words still ringing in his ears. The Friday night lights blazed over Ridgewood High's football field, illuminating the packed stands. Jake adjusted his helmet as he ran onto the field with the rest of the team, the roar of the crowd vibrating in his chest. He hadn't been sure he'd even get to play tonight. Coach had been vague all week about whether Jake would start after everything that had happened. But when the lineup was announced, there was his name, starting quarterback. The first half flew by in a blur of passes and tackles. Jake played better than he had all season, his focus razor sharp. By halftime, Ridgewood was up 14-7. As the team gathered in the locker room, Coach Wilkins pulled Jake aside. "You're doing good out there. Keep your head in the game." Jake nodded, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Yes, Coach." Tyler shoved past them on his way to the water cooler, knocking Jake's shoulder hard. "Oops. My bad." Coach's eyes narrowed, but he didn't say anything. The second half started strong. Jake completed 3 passes in a row, driving the team down the field. On third down, he spotted Tyler open near the end zone and launched the ball, only for Tyler to deliberately let it slip through his fingers. The crowd groaned. Jake stared at his receiver in disbelief. Tyler just smirked and jogged back to the huddle. "Guess you lost your touch, Mercer." Jake clenched his jaw but didn't respond. The game tightened after that. The opposing team scored twice, putting Ridgewood down 21-14 with 5 minutes left. During a timeout, Jake noticed a commotion in the stands near the home team's bench. Michael and several other kids from the special needs program were there, waving signs with his number on them. Naomi sat with them, her usual reserved expression replaced with something like enthusiasm as she cheered. Something warm spread through Jake's chest. The final drive started at Ridgewood's own 20-yard line. Jake moved the team steadily down the field with short passes and smart runs. With 30 seconds left, they found themselves at the opponent's 15-yard line. In the huddle, Tyler refused to meet Jake's eyes. "Just give the ball to someone who can actually score." Jake took a deep breath. Hike on 2. The ball snapped into his hands. Jake dropped back, scanning the field. Tyler was covered. So was the secondary receiver. The pocket collapsed around him as defenders broke through the line. Then he spotted Mark flashing open near the sideline. Jake launched the ball just as a linebacker slammed into him, knocking him to the turf. The crowd erupted as he hit the ground. Had it been caught? A hand appeared in his vision, pulling him up. Mark stood there, grinning. Touchdown, man. The scoreboard flashed 21-20. One extra point would tie the game. Coach Wilkins called for the kicking team, but Jake hesitated. Coach, let me run it in. We can win this. Coach studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Your call. The team lined up for the 2-point conversion. The stadium was deafening as Jake took the snap. He faked a handoff, then rolled right, and saw Tyler standing wide open in the end zone. For a split second, Jake hesitated. Then he planted his feet and threw. The ball spiraled through the air, landing perfectly in Tyler's hands. The buzzer sounded. Ridgewood won 22-21. The team mobbed Tyler in the end zone, lifting him onto their shoulders. Jake hung back, catching his breath. After a moment, Tyler broke free from the celebration and walked over. He studied Jake for a long moment before extending his hand. Good game. Jake shook it. You too. Tyler hesitated, then lowered his voice. Look about everything. Jake shook his head. Forget it. We won. Tyler nodded slowly, then jogged back to the team. As Jake walked off the field, he spotted Naomi waiting near the tunnel. She fell into step beside him. That was a good pass, she said. Jake smiled. Yeah, it was. They walked into the locker room together, the cheers of the crowd still echoing behind them. The Monday after the big game, Jake walked into school feeling lighter than he had in weeks. The victory had eased some of the tension with his teammates, and even Tyler had stopped glaring at him in the halls. Naomi was already at her locker when Jake arrived, sorting through books with her usual efficiency. She glanced up as he approached. You're late, she said, though there was no real reproach in her tone. Jake checked his phone. By like 30 seconds. Naomi smirked and shut her locker. My dad wants to know if you'd like to come over for dinner tonight. Jake nearly dropped his backpack. What? He said you could use a proper home-cooked meal. Naomi adjusted the strap of her bag. Unless you're busy. No, I'm not busy. Jake ran a hand through his hair. That would be great. Naomi nodded. Good. Be at our house at 6. Don't be late. She walked away before Jake could respond. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Jake barely paid attention in class, his mind racing. Dinner at the principal's house? With Naomi? What was he supposed to wear? What if he said something stupid? After school, Jake rushed home to shower and change. He settled on dark jeans and a button-down shirt, not too formal, but not sloppy either. His mother raised an eyebrow when she saw him. Hot date, she teased. Jake's face burned. It's not like that. Principal Carter invited me over for dinner. His mother's expression softened. That's wonderful, honey. She reached out to straighten his collar. Just be yourself. Jake nodded, though his stomach was in knots. The Carter house was a modest 2-story colonial on the quieter side of town. Jake parked his bike in the driveway and took a deep breath before ringing the bell. Naomi answered the door. She wore a simple blue sweater and jeans, her hair loose around her shoulders instead of its usual ponytail. You made it, she said, stepping aside to let him in. The house smelled like garlic and herbs. Principal Carter stood in the kitchen doorway, wearing an apron over his usual dress shirt. Jake, he said with a nod. Glad you could come. Thank you for inviting me, sir. Principal Carter waved a hand. None of that's business here. It's Daniel tonight. Dinner was surprisingly relaxed. Principal Carter, Daniel, turned out to be an excellent cook, serving up roast chicken with potatoes and green beans. He asked Jake about football, about his plans for college, even about working with the special needs program. Naomi mostly listened, chiming in occasionally with a dry observation that made Jake laugh. After dessert, apple pie with vanilla ice cream. Daniel stood. I have some papers to grade. Naomi, why don't you show Jake the backyard? Naomi rolled her eyes but led Jake through the sliding glass doors to a small patio. String lights crisscrossed overhead, casting a warm glow over the space. Jake sat on a wooden bench. Your dad's not what I expected. Naomi sat beside him. What did you expect? I don't know. More. Principal, why? Naomi smiled. He's different at home. A comfortable silence fell between them. Crickets chirped in the bushes, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. Jake hesitated before asking the question that had been on his mind all day. Why did you invite me? Naomi looked up at the stars. Because people deserve second chances. She turned to face him. And because you're not who I thought you were. Jake's breath caught. Is that a good thing? Naomi's smile was small but real. Yeah, it is. 2 weeks later, Jake was helping Michael with his free throws when his phone buzzed. He usually ignored texts during the program, but something made him check. It was from Tyler. Asterisk urgent. Naomi hurt. Auditorium. Now. Asterisk. Jake's blood ran cold. He turned to Coach Wilkins. I have to go. It's an emergency. Coach took one look at his face and nodded. Go. Jake ran. The auditorium doors were propped open when he arrived. A small crowd gathered near the stage. Jake pushed through, his heart pounding. Naomi sat on the edge of the stage, clutching her ankle. Her face was pale, her jaw clenched in pain. Tyler and a few theater kids hovered nearby. What happened? Jake dropped to his knees beside her. Naomi shook her head. It's nothing. She fell off the stage, Tyler cut in. We were rehearsing for the spring play, and one of the boards gave way. Jake gently lifted Naomi's hand away from her ankle. It was already swelling, the skin turning an ugly shade of purple. We need to get you to the nurse, he said. Naomi tried to stand, then gasped and fell back. I can't walk. Without thinking, Jake slid one arm under her knees and the other behind her back, lifting her easily. Naomi's eyes widened. Put me down. Not happening. Jake adjusted his grip. Tyler, grab her bag. To his credit, Tyler didn't argue. He snatched up Naomi's backpack and followed as Jake carried her out of the auditorium. Naomi was surprisingly light. Her arms looped awkwardly around Jake's neck. She smelled like vanilla and something floral. Her shampoo, maybe. This is embarrassing, she muttered. Jake grinned despite the situation. Enjoy the ride, Carter. The nurse's office was empty when they arrived. Jake set Naomi gently on the cot while Tyler explained what happened. The nurse examined Naomi's ankle with practiced hands. Definitely sprained. Possibly fractured. I'm calling your father. Naomi groaned. Great. Principal Carter arrived within minutes, his face tight with concern. He took one look at Naomi's ankle and immediately pulled out his phone. I'm taking you to the hospital for x-rays. Naomi started to protest, but her father cut her off. Not up for discussion. Principal Carter turned to Jake and Tyler. Thank you for helping her. Tyler shuffled his feet. It was mostly Jake. Jake met the principal's gaze. Is there anything else we can do? Principal Carter shook his head. You've done enough. Go on home. As they left the nurse's office, Tyler hesitated. Listen, about before. I was an asshole. Jake blinked. Yeah, you were. Tyler sighed. Naomi's cool. I get why you're friends now. Jake studied his former best friend. You could be friends with her too, you know. Tyler looked surprised, then thoughtful. Maybe. They walked out of the school together, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the parking lot. The next afternoon, Jake stood outside Ridgewood General Hospital holding a bouquet of flowers and a bag of Naomi's favorite books from the school library. He'd texted Principal Carter for permission to visit, and after a surprisingly quick response, room 312. Don't stay too long, she needs rest. Here he was. The elevator ride to the third floor felt interminable. Jake adjusted his grip on the flowers for the fourth time, suddenly questioning his choices. Were flowers too much? Would Naomi even like them? Room 312 was halfway down the hall. The door was slightly ajar. Jake knocked softly. "Come in." Principal Carter's voice. Jake pushed the door open. Naomi was propped up in bed, her right leg elevated and wrapped in a bulky brace. Principal Carter sat in a chair nearby, grading papers. Naomi looked up from her book. Her eyes flicked to the flowers, then back to Jake's face. "You brought me flowers?" Jake felt his ears grow warm. "And books? Since you're stuck here." Principal Carter stood, gathering his papers. "I'll give you two some privacy. Naomi, remember what the doctor said about resting?" Naomi rolled her eyes. "Yes, Dad." Once Principal Carter left, Jake set the flowers on the bedside table and handed Naomi the books. "How bad is it?" "Just a bad sprain, no fracture." Naomi shifted slightly, wincing. "But I'm out of the spring play." Jake pulled up a chair. "That sucks." Naomi shrugged. "It was just an extracurricular. Not like I was going to Broadway." She picked up one of the books Jake had brought, a thick fantasy novel. "You remembered this was my favorite series." Jake rubbed the back of his neck. "You mentioned it once at lunch." Naomi studied him for a long moment before opening the book. "Thanks." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, Naomi reading and Jake scrolling through his phone. Eventually, a nurse came in to check Naomi's vitals. When the nurse left, Naomi set her book down. "You didn't have to come, you know." Jake met her gaze. "I wanted to." Something unreadable flickered across Naomi's face. Before she could respond, the door burst open. Tyler stood in the doorway, breathing hard like he'd run up the stairs. He held a massive get-well card in one hand and a bag of candy in the other. "Sorry I'm late," he gasped. Then he saw Jake and froze. "Oh, hey." Naomi raised an eyebrow. "Are you two coordinating visits now?" Tyler shuffled his feet. "I just felt bad about the accident." Jake stood, gesturing to his chair. "I was just leaving anyway. Visiting hours are almost over." Naomi's expression shifted slightly, something almost like disappointment. "Right." Tyler held out the card. "The whole drama club signed this." Jake grabbed his backpack. "I'll see you at school, Naomi." As he reached the door, Naomi called after him. "Jake." He turned. "Thanks for the books." Jake nodded and stepped into the hall, where he nearly collided with Principal Carter. "Leaving so soon?" the principal asked. Jake gestured vaguely toward the elevators. "Yeah, Tyler's here now, so..." Principal Carter studied him for a moment. "I see." He clapped Jake on the shoulder. "Naomi appreciates your visit. More than she'll say." Jake wasn't sure how to respond to that. "I hope she feels better soon." The elevator doors opened. As Jake stepped inside, he glanced back at room 312. Through the small window, he could see Tyler animatedly telling some story, Naomi smiling slightly as she listened. Something twisted in Jake's chest. He looked away. Naomi returned to school a week later on crutches. Jake offered to carry her books, but she refused with her usual stubbornness. At lunch, Tyler started joining them regularly. At first, it was awkward, long silences punctuated by forced small talk. But gradually, they found a rhythm. Tyler turned out to be surprisingly funny when he wasn't trying to impress anyone, and Naomi had a dry wit that caught them both off guard sometimes. One rainy Tuesday, their English teacher, Ms. Green, announced a major semester project. "You'll be working in groups of 3, she said, passing out assignment sheets. "The topic is overcoming adversity. You'll need to interview someone who's faced significant challenges, then present your findings to the class." Jake glanced at Naomi and Tyler. Without discussion, they moved their desks together when Ms. Green told them to form groups. Tyler grabbed the assignment sheet. "So who should we interview? Maybe that veteran who runs the..." "No." Naomi's voice was firm. "We're interviewing Michael." Jake blinked. "From the special needs program?" Naomi nodded. "He's faced more adversity before breakfast than most people do in a lifetime. And he's got amazing stories if you actually listen." Tyler opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. Actually, that's a good idea. Jake smiled. It's perfect. After school, they found Michael in the gym with Coach Wilkins. When they explained the project, Michael's face lit up. You want to interview me? Seriously? Naomi nodded. We think your perspective is important. Coach Wilkins gave them an approving look. Use my office. I'll keep the others busy out here. For the next hour, Michael told them about growing up with cerebral palsy, about the countless surgeries and therapies, about kids who mocked him and teachers who underestimated him. But he also talked about his love of basketball, his dreams of coaching someday, and how Coach Wilkins had changed his life by treating him like a person, not a diagnosis. By the end, even Tyler was scribbling furious notes. When they finished, Michael wheeled himself back to the court with a grin. Thanks, guys. Nobody's ever wanted to hear my story before. As they packed up their things, Tyler was uncharacteristically quiet. Jake nudged him. You okay? Tyler shook his head. I was such a dick to him last year. Made fun of his chair, called him names. He looked at Naomi. How do you come back from that? Naomi considered the question. You don't come back. You move forward. Do better. Tyler nodded slowly. Yeah, okay. They walked out of the gym together, the weight of Michael's words lingering between them. The day of the English project arrived with unseasonably warm weather. Sunshine streamed through the classroom windows as groups set up their presentations. Jake adjusted his tie, the same one he'd worn to dinner at Naomi's, while Tyler fidgeted with their slideshow. Naomi, now walking with just a slight limp, reviewed their notes. Remember, Michael's story is the focus, not our commentary. Tyler nodded, uncharacteristically serious. Got it. Ms. Green called their group up first. Jake's palms were sweating as they took their positions. Naomi at the podium, Tyler running the slides, Jake standing ready with their interview clips. Naomi began without preamble. Adversity isn't just about facing challenges. It's about how those challenges change you, or how you refuse to let them. The screen behind her showed a photo of Michael in his wheelchair at a basketball game, his face alight with joy. For the next 15 minutes, they shared Michael's story. His struggles, yes, but also his triumphs. Tyler played a clip of Michael talking about the first time he made a basket without assistance. Jake read excerpts from Michael's journal about being treated differently because of his chair. Naomi concluded, adversity didn't make Michael special. His response to it did. And that's a choice available to all of us. The classroom erupted in applause. Even Ms. Green looked impressed. As they returned to their seats, Tyler whispered, We killed it. Jake grinned. Yeah, we did. Naomi just smiled, but her eyes were bright. 2 weeks later, Jake found a note in his locker. The handwriting was unfamiliar. Jake, asterisk, you probably don't remember me, but I'm Jason's mom from the special needs program. Jason talks about you all the time, how you high-five him at practice, how you never treat him like he's different. Asterisk. Asterisk, I just wanted to say thank you for seeing my son, really seeing him. Asterisk, Mrs. Whitmore. Jake read the letter 3 times before carefully folding it and putting it in his wallet. The final basketball game of the season was standing room only. Michael had been practicing all semester for this, his first time playing in an actual game. Jake sat with Naomi and Tyler in the front row. When Michael rolled onto the court during starting lineups, the entire gym erupted. Coach Wilkins called a timeout with 30 seconds left, just long enough to sub Michael in. The score didn't matter. Ridgewood was up by 20. This was about something else. The crowd held its breath as Michael took possession. He dribbled down the court with surprising speed, his chair a blur. At the three-point line, he stopped, set, and shot. The ball arced perfectly through the air. Swish. The buzzer sounded. The crowd went wild. On the court, Michael was mobbed by his teammates. In the stands, Jake found himself hugging Naomi and Tyler without thinking. When they pulled apart, Naomi was laughing, Tyler was crying, and Jake felt something he couldn't quite name. Graduation arrived sooner than anyone expected. As Jake stood in his cap and gown waiting for his name to be called, he glanced down the line at Naomi, valedictorian, naturally, and Tyler, who'd somehow become one of his closest friends. Principal Carter handed Jake his diploma with a firm handshake. "Proud of you, son." Later, as fireworks lit up the sky over the football field, Jake found Naomi sitting alone in the stands. "Hey," he said, sitting beside her. "Hey." They watched the fireworks in comfortable silence. After a while, Naomi spoke. "You know, when we first met, I thought you were just another jerk." Jake laughed. "I was." Naomi turned to face him. The colored lights played across her features. "But you changed. That's the important part." Jake held her gaze. "So what now?" Naomi smiled. "Now we see what happens next." And as the final fireworks exploded overhead, Jake realized this wasn't an ending at all. It was just the beginning. 5 years later, the email arrived on a Tuesday morning. "Dear Mr. Mercer, we're pleased to offer you the position of assistant coach for the Ridgewood Special Needs basketball program." Jake smiled and reached for his phone. He had 2 calls to make, one to Coach Wilkins, and one to a certain medical student who'd be thrilled to hear the news. Somewhere in his wallet, folded carefully behind his ID, a faded letter from Mrs. Whitmore reminded him how far he'd come, and how much further he still had to go.